Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast. I'm Abby Brinker. I'm here with Alan Kudan.
Hello.
And today we are talking about the Stanley Hotel.
That's famous.
It's famous. Do you know why?
You know what? I think you're going to tell us in better words.
It's famous because it is the hotel that Stephen King stayed at that inspired the book The Shining.
He too is famous.
Yes. And of course, the book The Shining inspired the movie The Shining.
Starring Jack Nicholson.
Yes, and directed by Stanley Kubrick. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about the paranormal activity that the Stanley Hotel is famous for, a little bit of the hotel's history, but we're also going to end talking about the book and the movie and the differences there. And then we have a fun surprise because a few of our friends voice acted a story that I wrote called The Night Elevator. And so it's based in a hotel, so it kind of fits the theme, and we're going to play that at the end.
That sounds really familiar.
One of our early episodes, when we were sort of just reading stories before we became a history podcast.
Before we did anything except read stories.
Right. It was just stories. It was featured in an episode. And since then it's been edited a bit because it's part of the short story collection that I put out. So it went through like some rounds of editing.
Well, I'm very excited for Night Elevator Mark II.
Yeah. And our dear friends at Jollyville took a stab at it and they added some cool sound effects and edited it themselves. And so it's really special.
We have Night Elevator Jollyville version.
Yes, Michael and Pilar, they used their snow day in Austin yesterday to bring our story to life, which was very generous.
That's very exciting.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you to hear it. One thing I do want to plug that's totally unrelated to this
is The Shining.
No, is a documentary that's currently on HBO Max called Beware the Slender Man.
Slenderman.
And the reason why I'm bringing up
why?
Because I watched it yesterday. And
I'm sorry. You said this was unrelated.
It's unrelated.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How was it?
It was really good.
Okay, so I think we talked about this back on the Creepypasta episode, but like I've always been super interested in the mythos. But delving through internet lore is really not my thing. So when they made a movie about it, I was pretty excited, but never got around to watching it. I also know that they made a Slenderman game.
Yeah.
But yeah, how did the movie come across?
Well, the movie's a documentary. It's about the stabbing. Do you remember we talked about that? There's 12-year-old girls that stabbed another 12-year-old girl because they thought Slender Man wanted them to. It's a documentary, and the reason why I liked it so much was because it really focuses on the issue of mental health, especially in children, how that relates to access to these really dark communities, right? And so if you're schizophrenic and you are on creepypasta.com all day reading about Slenderman, like, you know, so it's just like a really unbiased look at mental health and the story and what happened and the parents and, you know, the heartache on both sides of it. So
was not expecting such social commentary from a Slenderman doc.
I know. But anyway, that's just one thing I wanted to suggest to people because I did enjoy it.
Cool. You'd think you would have talked about this on the movie club episode instead.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We could certainly do an episode on it. If you don't know, we do Horror Movie Club, which is bonus episodes of this podcast that are available through our Patreon, but we call it Horror Movie Club because every month we cover different movies.
We sure do.
That would be a good one to talk about.
Well, I mean, we just talked about it here, so obviously everyone is now well-versed and going to go out and watch it.
We really briefly talked about it. Yeah, okay.
So we'll have to focus on even better movies for Movie Club.
That's right. So speaking of Horror Movie Club, obviously the watch list for this episode is The Shining.
Yeah, about that. I got to start just learning these episodes because I have not seen The Shining in years.
Which I, of course, assumed you would totally have watched it a bunch of times.
Everyone loves the movie. It's a favorite film for so many people. As the Trees Have Fallen, I have not seen it in many years. I actually don't remember it that well. Some bits are obviously ingrained in my memory, but it's been a while. So I'm sure more is gonna come as we start talking about it. But yeah, it's not exactly fresh in my mind.
I think the good news for you and anybody who maybe is in the same boat, we're not going to focus so much on the plot of the movie or the book. I also don't want to give it away for anybody. But we're going to talk about like the history of this hotel that really inspired the story, and a little bit about the differences between the movie and the book. But it's not, I think it's still interesting even if you haven't yet watched it, and hopefully it will inspire you to go watch it and read it.
Okay. I don't know when the appropriate time to talk about this is, so I'm just going to talk about it now.
Why do you always have a moment on every podcast where you say that sentence?
Because it happens every time we speak.
Okay. What is your big thing?
So what's the sequel to The Shining that you saw?
I didn't see it. There's a Dr. Sleep movie.
Dr. Sleep?
Is that what you're talking about?
It's like in a town, right? Yeah, you heard me.
It's in a town.
It's in a town. So there was a movie that came out a year or two ago.
Yep.
And I thought it was a sequel to The Shining.
It is, but I've never seen it.
Oh,
it's
okay.
called Dr. Sleep.
Do you know anything about it?
No.
Okay. So when I saw, well, good, because I've not seen it either. But obviously I saw trailers, and it's all about people or kids or somebody that has like telepathic abilities, I think. And that's what The Shining is.
Yeah, that's from the original movie too.
Right, but I didn't remember that at all from the original.
It gets overpowered by the paranormal shit that happens.
Right. So there's paranormal stuff, and then there's also a psychic kid?
I guess that's not the right way to say it. Obviously, paranormal things happen in the movie, but the fact that the kid has some sort of telepathic ability is easy to forget based on like when you compare it to the bigger things that go down.
My memory of the plot of the film is that you have Jack Nicholson. He brings his family to the Overlook Hotel. Spooky things start to happen. Ghosts drive him mad, and he attacks his family.
So there's a scene where Danny and the head chef at the hotel.
So there's people beyond the Torrance family in the hotel at the beginning?
At the beginning, because he comes on, he's a caretaker, so they get him set up. Like they say, here's the kitchen.
Right. That's right. He was like handing the torch.
Right. So there's a scene where Danny at the beginning and this chef guy who's like showing them around the kitchen and how to cook for themselves. He talks to Danny telepathically because he recognizes that they both are telepathic.
Okay. No, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a part of what happens. Yeah.
I assume we're allowed to speak spoilers about a movie from the 80s.
Sure.
Okay. So spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
One of the main things that I remember about the film is the very, very end. When we finally see Jack Nicholson in a painting, in a photograph, sitting with all these like old time people from, what was it, the 20s or something?
Yeah.
What's that about?
So the movie and the book are very different. In the movie, the idea is that Jack Torrance is reincarnated of somebody else, or he's, there's like this, what The Shining is this resurgence of something that happened in the 20s, and he's sort of hallucinating or it's haunting him or whatever.
Oh,
but
that's good.
Okay,
so it's cyclical. It's an event
which is different, I believe, than how it's like in the book. Again, having not read the book, I believe that it's a little bit different version of that.
Okay. Oh, that makes perfect sense. So, having not understood the movie very well, understanding, I thought it was just a slasher film the first time I saw it. I had no idea that there was going to be supernatural elements. I thought it was just a guy gets driven crazy by the winter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's like the whole hallway of blood and that sort of thing, which I'm still don't understand.
I mean, it's very visually striking for sure.
Oh, I mean, it's a Kubrick film. All his movies are visually striking. I'm sorry, we've already gotten like way off topic. This is just me asking a bunch of questions about
that's okay. The
movie
are
itself.
Welcome.
First things first, the hotel is a real place.
Yes. So the hotel is a real place, and let me tell you a little bit about it.
Please do.
So today we're talking about the Stanley Hotel, which again is the real life hotel that inspired the Overlook Hotel in Stephen King's The Shining, which is the novel. If you visit the hotel now, they actually have a channel dedicated to playing the movie on repeat.
So if I were to visit, where is this place in the real world?
It's in Estes Park, Colorado, which is about a 90-minute drive northwest of Denver. But it's not King's novel that inspired the paranormal reputation of the Stanley Hotel. Reports of ghostly activity at the hotel date back to when it was built in the early 1900s. We are going to talk about some of the most infamous of these incidents, but it's important to note that there have been reports of hauntings in every single room of the Stanley Hotel. And that's not just saying the hotel rooms. I mean literally every single room. Every kitchen, every closet, every bathroom, every hallway.
We're talking separate hauntings.
Yes. It is thought of as the most haunted hotel in the United States. It is one of the most haunted places in the United States.
What is it about hotels?
I mean, if I was a paranormal researcher or whatever.
Wait, hang on. Disclaimer. We're not. I think the idea is that there have been so many people that have passed through there, so many people that have probably died organically because it's a massive hotel, that it's more likely that there would be spirit. I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm not an expert in ghosts. But people don't typically die in hotels. I mean, that is me completely pulling a fact out of thin air.
But think of like a single family home. Okay, maybe 5 people die there in a century or in 2 centuries, but in a huge hotel.
Depends on the home.
Sure. Nowadays, the hotel even offers a ghost adventure package, which includes a room on the 4th floor, which is the most haunted floor, an electromagnetic field recorder, and a red rum mug.
And a free continental breakfast.
This all might seem a little cheesy, but keep in mind that the Stanley runs a tight ship when it comes to hauntings. If a member of the staff is caught faking anything paranormal or involved in any sort of hoax, they will be fired immediately. Sources. An article from OutThereColorado.com, The Spooky Story Behind Colorado's Haunted Stanley Hotel by Stephanie Earls, a documentary I watched called Shining Secrets of the Stanley Hotel, a Mental Floss article by Meredith Danko, and of course, our good old friend Wikipedia. All right, so we're going to get into some really brief history because I think it's important to set the stage.
Okay.
In 1903, Freeland Oscar Stanley grew ill with tuberculosis, and he was from the East Coast.
That's a pretty bad one.
His doctor ordered fresh and dry air, so he moved with his wife to Estes Park, Colorado for the summer. And he actually became healthy and overcame the illness, and he loved the area so much that he returned every summer.
Clearly sold his soul to the devil.
Yeah, and keep in mind, he was a very affluent person. He had aspirations to turn Estes Park into a resort town so that his friends would be able to join him and be entertained each year. Stanley bought the land from Lord Dunraven. Doesn't that sound like a villain name?
Lord Dunraven?
Dunraven?
Dunraven. Yeah, absolutely.
Why would you pronounce it Dunraven? You just take out all the vowels?
I mean, I pronounce it Slenderman. Like, what do you... Does this surprise you?
I'm just trying to understand. Dunraven was unpopular in the area because he acquired the land through one of the biggest land steals in American history.
He was also a vampire.
He claimed 15,000 acres of territory. Of course, all of this is stolen land that belonged to the Native Americans that lived here before us. Dunraven was so unpopular that he was forced out of the area.
By stakes in sunlight.
I thought this was interesting because Stanley...
Dunraven.
No, Freeland Oscar Stanley, who built the Stanley Hotel, was originally going to name the hotel after Lord Dunraven because it was his land. And the people of Estes Park, Colorado, on a deer skin, signed a petition begging him not to name it after Dunraven because Dunraven had stolen all of this land.
What year was it?
1907, I believe.
And they signed their documents on a deer skin.
Yep.
Props.
So the Stanley brothers, he actually had a brother as well, had come into their fortune. I only included this on because I thought you'd be interested in this.
Oh, thank you. I can't wait to hear this.
They came into their fortune by founding a dry plate company.
Dry plate?
Though dry plate technology had already been invented for photography, most people were still using wet plates, which meant subjects had to sit still for 30 minutes during portraits as the chemicals dried.
I'm sorry. I thought they invented porcelain as opposed to wet clay.
Yeah. So the Stanley brothers improved the factory production of dry plates and launched a very successful marketing campaign.
I mean, hell yeah, that was huge.
Yeah.
That was a huge innovation for any kind of captured photo optical realism.
And again, they didn't invent the technology, but they made the technology accessible.
Right. So it's like people that invented Xerox, right? Xerox came up with their technology after photography was invented. It's a similar technology, but it's very limited in the scope of things that it can capture, but it's faster.
Right.
And obviously what they ended up doing was making photocopiers. Their technology, which was designed for photography, was completely obsolete for photography, but simply got repurposed for the means of making photocopies.
So the Stanley brothers used the money that they got from their dry plate technology innovations.
They earned every penny.
And they used it to buy the land and to build the hotel. So when the hotel was built, this is actually interesting. I found, like, every article I read, the hotel has a different number of rooms. Some articles said it had 142 rooms. Some said it had 48.
I heard 6.
Some said 25. But anyway, all I know is that at the time it was built, it had 48 rooms, and it seems to have fluctuated since then.
Well, in true real estate trends, it started with big rooms, and they just chopped them up into little pieces so they could rent them out for more money.
There you go. The Stanley's guests would come out for the summer, so they're friends from the East Coast, usually paying between $5 and $8 a night, which included the hotel room, all of their meals, and the hotel entertainment.
$8 a night?
5 to 8.
A very good deal, and that still came with the free continental breakfast
And the red rum mug.
What honestly, what more do you ask for from a hotel visit?
The hotel had a separate concert hall that would attract some of the biggest acts in the country. It still has a concert hall. I don't know why I'm saying that in the past tense.
And this is early 1900s.
Yeah, when it was built.
Okay, so yeah, this is the modern era.
When the hotel was built, there was a system of underground tunnels that the workers used to avoid the elements. So as they were building it, they created a tunnel system so they could haul lumber, store lumber, things like that.
Jeez.
After it opened, and the hotel is built, just to say, the hotel is built on top of a mountain. So it doesn't have a real foundation. It sits on top of the rock of this mountain.
Sure.
So it's made to shift and sway a bit as the mountain moves.
Mountains move?
Well, there's one story in the documentary that I watched where, a few years ago, they had to blast through parts of the mountain to build a highway or something. And everyone was really worried about what would happen. And the hotel was totally fine because it's built to because it's built to absorb those sorts of shocks.
Wow. That's a lot of foresight.
Yeah.
That's like California level engineering.
Many of the tunnels since have collapsed naturally, or the hotel collapsed them as a safety measure. To this day, there's only about an 8-foot stretch of tunnel left in the basement. And this tunnel leads us perfectly into talking about some of the hauntings.
The 8-foot tunnel.
How
much haunting can you get? Okay. How much haunting can you get in 8 feet?
Well, we're about to find out. Ghost hunters visited the Stanley Hotel in 2006. And I'm going to reference ghost hunters throughout this episode.
So that's ghost hunters with a little TM at the end.
That is a sci-fi show, Ghost Hunters.
The official Ghost Hunters.
That's right. The episode is season 3, episode 5, and there's a few subsequent episodes if you want. The Ghost Hunters go and they do a live Halloween show there in 2006, and then they do a few follow-up investigations after because they had so much activity. While in the tunnel, Jason and Grant hear giggling that sounds like a little girl. They also hear the voice saying, "Hello." Staff members of the Stanley Hotel
Hello.
Staff members of the Stanley Hotel have also heard voices and seen shadowy figures around this spot. One hotel tour guide also reported feeling someone tap him on the shoulder just outside the tunnel. He turned to see no one behind him. I'm going to avoid, beyond a few sections, talking about things that can't be proven because I know what your response is going to be. So a lot of the hauntings going forward are things I've seen represented in video, at least, in some cases.
So as soon as you started talking about shadowy figures, that makes me think of shadow people.
What are shadow people?
So I'm glad you asked. So shadow people are a known side effect of the abuse of amphetamines. So if you take too much for too long, it is a known side effect that you just see this shadowy figure standing in the corner. And as soon as you try to look directly at it, they disappear.
That's pretty terrifying.
It's horrifying. So I'm told.
Is this something you suffer from?
No, of course not.
What's amphetamines?
Amphetamines would be cocaine, methamphetamine, any kind of crazy stimulant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you use it too much and you start seeing the shadow people. It's incredibly paranoia inducing and absolutely terrifying. There's a bunch of very, it's what's the word? When the car crash effect when you can't look away. There's so many of these stories on the internet of people that have to deal with shadow people because they've been on a bender for like 3 days and they're like, oh, the shadow people have arrived. That's how you know it's time to stop.
Wow, that's pretty upsetting.
It's horrifying.
But I will say probably not super relevant to the episode because a lot of the cases, it's multiple people seeing a shadow figure, and unless everybody in the Ghost Hunters crew and everybody of the hotel staff are abusing amphetamines, which I guess is possible.
Guilty until proven innocent.
Okay. Room 1302, which is part of the lodge, which is a separate building, has an interesting story. A housekeeper one day had just finished cleaning when she poked her head out to talk to her manager. When the pair re-entered the room, all of the lamps and art were on the floor, mere seconds after she had finished tidying up.
How many lamps and art are we talking about?
6.
Okay, that's a serious number.
Mm-hmm.
That's a serious number to talk about. Continue. Your validity has been validated.
Thanks. Grant from the Ghost Hunters team investigates this room during their 2006 Halloween live show. This I saw happen on camera.
Okay.
So Grant is one of the Ghost Hunters guys.
Yep.
It's like between, they're not recording. Like they're filming, but it's not really a section yet, right?
Okay.
And his camcorder has run out of tape. So he's changing, this is when they're using like tape.
Right. They're on mini DV tape.
Yeah. So he's changing his mini DV tape. And he asks one of the production camera guys who has a light on his camera to come closer just because they're all in the dark. It's Ghost Hunters, right? So he just wants to see better so he can change the tape.
Okay.
So he asks this guy, Kendall, to come over. Kendall's like, sure.
Kendall.
Yeah.
Okay. Hate him already.
No, that's mean. He's a camera guy. You're a camera guy.
Sorry, Kendall.
So Kendall comes over with his light and he's just standing near Grant, who's sitting at a table so he can illuminate what he's doing.
Yep.
But he's filming. And so you see on Kendall's camera the table and chair that he's sitting at, like a spare chair, but where Grant is sitting.
How much light are we talking about? How many foot Kendalls?
So he's you could see on the tape the table and chair sort of like slam. They shift really violently and loudly, and Kendall's like kind of like screams and walks backwards really fast so that you can see in his camera like pretty quickly the whole table. Like he backs up.
Yeah.
And you can still see it sort of settling back into place after whatever happened to it. And it's a really violent like moment. And they both, and again, you can say it's fake. You can say that they're actors, like, sure. But I would say they're really, and this is a live show, that they're really convincing. Sure, this all could be orchestrated 100%. I'm going to just say that now to concede to whatever you're going to say next. But
you don't know what I'm going to say.
It's pretty convincing.
The orchestration that goes into these shows is 100% just made for TV. There's not to say that spooky things did not happen, but almost guaranteed those spooky things did not happen on camera and they were recreated in order to capture them.
They have some episodes where nothing happens, where they go and they investigate and nothing happens.
And doesn't that add validity to your opinion?
Yeah. That's why I'm saying it right now.
Because the show's produced.
This is what I'll say. If I was going to bring you to any hotel or any place to try to get you to have a paranormal experience,
yes,
this would be the place that I would bring you to. Because I think it would be the most likely that something would happen.
Okay, so hang on. We're going to cut. We're going to move to the Stanley Hotel and resume.
Yeah. And I am going to reference Ghost Hunters a few more times in this episode because there is, and here's the thing, there's visual representation in these episodes of a lot of paranormal things that other people report, right? So just, again, maybe they are faking it, but what they're faking is based on the rumors that have already existed. So take it with a grain of salt, right?
And that's also what I'm saying. How I'm not saying that these things didn't happen. I'm saying that the things that you have seen on broadcast TV have been orchestrated for the cameras.
Maybe.
If a paranormal activity had ever actually been captured with a proper film crew, I feel like it would have been such a bigger deal.
Well, you would never believe it. How would you say, oh, it's Ghost Hunters versus it's someone on YouTube versus it's Stanley Kubrick? Like, you wouldn't believe it no matter who it came from.
I suppose that's true. They're already the boy that cries wolf.
Like, all of these things already could be true and happening and recorded, but because you are a skeptic, you're not going to believe it no matter what.
You're not wrong. I'll also admit, I'm pretty jaded in the subject.
Mm-hmm. Someday we'll get you out there.
Please, if anyone has a ghost, what's your handle? Send them in.
The Lunatics Project.
Yes, tweet the ghost.
The concert hall is also a part of the Stanley Hotel. It's a separate building. The concert hall.
Oh.
I'm only talking about this because
the final shot of The Shining.
Well, it's interesting you say that because a woman experiencing homelessness like back a long time ago was living there during the winter. And again, the hotel shuts down just like it does the movie during the winter time. Mm-hmm. It's a 3-season hotel. This woman was living in the concert hall and actually died, like passed away, froze to death because it was so cold, because of course they weren't heating it even still. And they found her body frozen to death later. And so it kind of is similar to the ending of the movie, right? And additionally, a lot of people have reported experiences in the concert hall of hearing shrieking from like where the sound booth would be, sort of up above of everything. And a lot of things like that. There's also in the hotel a ballroom, and I thought this was another connection to the movie, where a lot of the kitchen staff, because there's like a kitchen off of the ballroom, the kitchen staff report hearing noises of like a really loud party, and they'll come out and it's empty. And so to me, those kind of rumors,
that's pretty cool,
feel like the movie. That's
pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, I can't explain this. When people are in a room and they see props slammed together, that feels fake to me. When people are working in one room and hear a raucous party and go into an empty room, for me, that just gives me chills. Why is that?
Have I told you the one paranormal experience I believe I've had?
Remind me.
I lived for a time in Connecticut.
On the world's largest dairy farm.
No, it was after that. In 3rd grade, I moved to this.
Sorry, world's oldest dairy farm, not largest.
No, yeah. So my first home was on the country's oldest dairy farm. Then I moved to my second home, which was in
the world's largest dairy farm.
No, which was just another town in Connecticut. But we moved into a development before it was really developed all the way. And so it was mostly just woods, right? It was surrounded very heavily by woods. And when I was young, I could hear at night, like every night, I would hear chanting noises in the middle of the night. Like I would wake up to it. It would wake me up. What sounded like coming from the woods, like fire crackling, chanting, drumming, like the noises of like some sort of huge procession, like terrifying, almost like a war procession or something, traveling through. And I would hear it all of the time. It would wake me up all the time. And I kept being like, I remember being in my bed being like, is this real? Like, is this my brain? Like, it's so crazy. Like, where's my family? And of course, nobody else ever heard it. And it was this whole thing. And so I kind of went through life being like, well, I guess that was just, what it was. Fast forward to when I was out of college, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago now. And a group of paranormal investigators came to that town, did a presentation, like there's a bunch of historical houses in that town, like that are preserved. And so they studied those houses and then did a presentation at like the town barn. And so we went, of course. they said largely they looked at, there's like 3 historical homes. They didn't experience anything in the homes. The one thing that they did experience was in the backyard of one of the houses. And if you're looking geographically, like the backyard of that house would have been through the woods, like quite a ways, like maybe half a mile or something, but through the woods would have been my house before all these other houses were built in the middle.
Okay.
So eventually the development was developed and there was all these houses in the middle. But at the time when I had heard these noises, it would have been a clear shot, right?
Yep.
So fast forward, this is many years later. The paranormal investigators are in the backyard of this house. It's like a field. And they hear chanting. And so they like follow it. And, as far as like they keep going, it keeps here. Like it sounds like it's the same distance away. Like no matter where they go, it's the same thing. And I was like, holy shit, in these same woods, right? Like I heard this too. And this was 15 years later. These guys are saying this, maybe more, 15 probably. So
how'd you find out about it?
How did I find out about what?
The paranormal investigators, what they discovered.
Because we went to a presentation, like at the barn.
You did say that.
Yeah. So we're all sitting in the town barn where my friend Jess got married and listening to this presentation. And I go up to the guy after and I said like, oh my God, I experienced that. And he kind of like was a dick to me, but he was kind of just like very dismissive about it.
Well, so screw Major Penis. Like we don't need him.
Yeah.
But as a skeptic, if I had to quantify what a interaction with a ghost would be, my best explanation for what ghosts are would be some kind of echo or recreation of past behavior of the energy of a human, right?
That's a type of ghost.
Well, I mean,
that's a residual haunting.
Okay, sure. But for me, that's the only thing that's plausible. Be it some kind of energy time loop. Every time it's someone like, paranormal investigators that are talking to a spirit that, interacts with them and their current wants and desires, like for me, that always feels fake. But when people are observing something of a ghost recreating behavior from the past, that's what gives me chills. That's what gives me plausibility of this might be real. I have no basis for that, but for whatever reason, it feels more visceral.
It's interesting. Yeah, totally.
But again, we're talking about the freaking Stanley Hotel here.
Okay, so we got off track again. Let's talk about the 4th floor.
Please.
The 4th floor of the Stanley Hotel is known as the most active of all the floors of the hotel.
How many floors are there?
4 is the top floor.
The big boy.
A lot of these reports center around children on the 4th floor. It's sort of known for its children-based hauntings, which, of course, you can see the similarities to the book and the movie with the twins, right? And with Danny. In early stages of the hotel...
The twins were just the ghosts in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the early stages of the hotel, the 4th floor was a space for hotel nannies to watch the children of guests. However, no children have ever been reported to have died on this floor.
So all the children died in 1 through 3?
No.
Okay.
The child ghosts are also thought to maybe be the daughter of one of the maids who used to work at the Stanley. The front desk of the hotel has to deal pretty consistently with guests calling to ask them to quiet the children running down the 4th floor corridor, in the middle of the night mostly. And of course, there's no children there. Usually no children are staying there, but they often get calls of like, can you tell those kids to go to bed, or, that kind of thing.
Have you ever called a front desk to ask kids to be quiet?
I've never called a front desk for anything. I mean, maybe to order a burger sometime, but I'm not going to like complain about people. That's not my thing. Sometimes guests see a red ball bouncing back and forth down the hallway as if kids are throwing it back and forth to each other.
Specifically red?
Yeah, specifically red. There's also been some paranormal investigators on the 4th floor who've had pretty intense experiences with kids sort of like not letting them sleep. One woman who's actually the official paranormal investigator of the Stanley Hotel tells a story about, one night she was trying to go to sleep. There's like, she could feel like fingerprints, like, kids flicking her, pinching her, tugging the covers. And then at one point...
How can you feel the fingertips of a child?
I don't think they felt like a child. I think she just felt like there was fingertips.
Okay. But
it was playful. Like it felt like someone was playing with her, like tickling her, that kind of stuff, like something a kid would do. But at one point she feels and hears a smack on her forehead, and it's so loud that it wakes her husband up in bed next to her, and they actually switch places, and then she's able to go to sleep.
Right, because they're not going to fuck with him.
Well, they're not going to fuck with him.
Rules are rules.
Room 428. So many guests of the hotel...
That's from the movie.
No, it's not. Many guests of the hotel have also reported seeing a cowboy in this room.
Right. This was the cowboy room.
That's right. So the idea is that guests see a cowboy walking back and forth at the end of the bed. So there's actually a photograph that shows a kid in the hallway sitting next to like a laundry bag.
Okay.
But he has a really broad rimmed hat and like, you know, old period clothing on.
Okay.
And so some people wonder if it's not this cowboy that's haunting the room, but it maybe is this kid in a broad rimmed hat.
That's spooky.
Yeah. That spooks you?
That got me.
All right. Well, maybe you should watch the documentary.
Freaking cowboy kids. No, thank you.
Reporter Stephanie Earls stayed at the hotel to research an article around its paranormal history, an article that we used for the research for this episode. She reported that a gust of wind, and this is something that a lot of people reported. She reported that a gust of wind came through, causing her window and door to slam shut, which of course, like, and there's a lot of accounts of windows and doors slamming shut, which makes a lot of sense, right? With the wind.
On top of a freaking Colorado mountain.
Right. And of course, like, even on top of the mountain that's shifting, like, you know, it makes a lot of sense that things are moving around.
Yeah.
The thing that creeped her out, though, was after the window and the door slammed shut with a huge bang, which was fine, all of a sudden the door started
Cowboy kid.
No, the door started to creak open slowly again.
It's hung improperly.
Well, so she recalls one of the hotel staff who said that there's no straight lines in this hotel, right?
Yeah.
Like everything is a little bit off.
Right.
So that was enough to settle her mind, and she went to sleep until, of course, 2 blood-curdling shrieks ripped her from her slumber. She describes the sound as definitely belonging to a child. And the last thing I'll say about ghost hunters is in room 401, Jason stayed, and there's video of this. You know, he's pretty much terrorized throughout the whole night. There's crazy noises coming from the closet, the doors opening and closing, and a glass, like a water glass, totally implodes and just like shatters into nothingness. So that scene is pretty dramatic, and you can watch it in that special.
Okay.
Tragedy. One of the most infamous tragedies, which brings us into the big hotel room 217, was that there's conflicting, every article again I read had different information about these things, but either in 1911 or in 1920. So the hotel was a novelty at the time because it had electricity. And it was one of the first hotels that was fully electric.
That's cool.
It, however, had a gas backup system in case.
So they had gas flowing to every room for like little sconces?
Correct.
Got it.
And so there's different versions of this story. In some cases, they say they were just installing the gas lines when this happened. And in other versions, there was a snowstorm that caused the electricity to go out. But either way, there was a maid named Elizabeth Wilson.
Okay.
Who was
different from Elizabeth Warren.
Yes. Who was walking around the hotel lighting the sconces.
Okay.
She gets to room 217. Her match is lit. And there's a huge gas explosion. She's thrown. So, right, she comes in. There must have been a gas leak in the room. She walks into it with a lit match. There's a huge explosion that devastates a big section of the hotel.
Okay.
She's thrown off of, like, she's on the second floor, off of the balcony onto the first floor.
Oh, shit.
Breaks both of her ankles, but survives.
Good.
And recovers and works at the hotel until she's 90.
Oh, wow. Good pension plan.
Yeah. And so she is believed to be, and this is room 217, which is the big room, right?
Yep.
That's the room in the book. And that's the room where Stephen King stayed. That's the room.
Okay. Remind me the significance of the room in the movie.
The room in the movie, that's like the bathtub room, the bathtub scene.
I do not.
Where there's like a really hot lady and he's like, oh, hey. And he like follows her and then she turns into like a crazy evil she's like naked and she turns into like a crazy demon thing.
Is this where he chops down the door?
No.
Yeah, the demon lady. That one.
You don't remember?
No, I don't.
It's like the only scene where there's a naked woman. No memory of it. Okay.
Dead to me.
But it's thought that Elizabeth Wilson haunts the room. She is known to...
Even though she lived to be 90?
Yes. Again, this is how folklore starts, right?
Yeah, okay.
She's known to pick up people's things, to tidy up shoes, tidy up toiletries.
The best type of ghost.
And the funny thing is, at the time, I guess, long ago, it wasn't acceptable for single men to stay in the main hotel. They would have to stay in a separate, like, side hotel.
As they should.
So if there's a single man in the room, they almost always report activity because people believe she doesn't approve of it.
Well, that's what they get.
In the autumn of 1974, Stephen King and his wife stayed at the Stanley Hotel. The hotel was going to close for the winter the next day. It was a 3-season hotel at the time, and only a small crew was remaining to take care of it throughout the winter, right? So boom, we get the setup for the book.
Okay.
The Stanley Hotel overlooks Estes Park. And again, it's no surprise that King named the fictionalized version of this hotel the Overlook in The Shining, because a lot of people call it the hotel that overlooks the town.
Oh, cool.
At the time of their stay, the hotel was having a bit of trouble attracting guests. So the Kings were actually the only paying guests in the hotel. And of course, they stayed in the presidential suite, room 217. The story goes that King had a nightmare that night. He dreamt that his son was being chased down a long hallway in the hotel by a possessed fire hose.
Oh.
He woke up in a cold sweat and went to the balcony to smoke.
Freud would have a lot to say about that.
Yes, he would. It was on the balcony that he came up for the idea for The Shining, his third novel, which would be his first best-selling book.
Do you remember which... It was one of his huge hit novels that he wrote during his, like, raging alcoholic phase. What's The Shining?
A lot of people think that Jack's character in The Shining is very much related to Stephen King overcoming his alcoholism.
Interesting.
It's like a thing that he like the hauntings are his demons, that kind of a thing.
Interesting. Okay.
The book and the movie both helped to inspire a resurgence in the hotel, which now does not struggle to fill rooms. So remember how we said that the 4th floor was like the children's haunted floor?
I do.
Stephen King also reported seeing the ghost of a child on the 4th floor. Okay, so this is the one I'm most excited to tell you about.
Please.
This is our final moment here, haunting moment.
Okay.
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey?
While on location...
Famous actor from The Mask.
While on location filming Dumb and Dumber, Jim Carrey stayed in room 217.
What an adventurist.
He didn't last the night.
Really?
In the early hours of the morning, he came to the front desk asking to be moved to another room. He told staff something had happened and he didn't feel safe. When they responded that all of the other rooms were booked, Carrey fled the hotel. We can only assume he went to stay somewhere else. He's never spoken publicly about what happened that night.
Jim Carrey, really?
Mm-hmm.
For some insane, asinine reason, he's an authority I trust.
I knew you would react that way, which is why I was so excited to tell you about it.
All right, looks like we got to go there.
The hotel staff admit that a lot of the reports of creaking and noises from the guests are just the sounds of a mountaintop hotel settling, right?
So, come on. Jim Carrey must have known what room he was staying in.
Maybe. I mean, they gave him that room because that was the presidential suite. That was the nicest. So, of course, they gave it to the star.
I see. Okay, so
that's why the king stayed there, because no one else was staying there, and it's the nicest room.
It's the nicest room. There's only one in the entire hotel.
Right.
Okay.
So again, I'm just bringing up the creaking because it's to say that I'm sure there are a lot of false reports because the hotel is built on top of this mountain and there's a lot of movement and creaking and wind and
definitely
animals and whatever else.
But that's why I was asking, because like anytime people are aware of the history, they're going to be looking for it, And, you and I have both experienced when we're in a place that we think is going to be creepy and it just makes sounds that are perfectly normal to an old house,
Yeah.
You get a little freaked out,
mm-hmm.
Houses settle, houses creak. It sounds like there are like footsteps, but it's just kind of like expansion and contraction,
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I know we talked about The Shining at the beginning, but let's round this out again and revisit now that we have renewed understanding of the history.
And vigor.
Stephen King's The Shining hit stores in January of 1977. Kubrick's movie adaptation was released 3 years later in 1980. Stephen King actually wrote an entire screenplay draft of The Shining, which Kubrick never read. Instead, he spent 11 weeks working on a new screenplay with author Diane Johnson.
So, fun fact about Stephen King and all of the movie adaptations. He hates every single one.
Well, we're going to get into it.
Oh, okay. Right. I'm sorry.
Kubrick was also known for calling King's writing weak.
With a very pronounceable W of weak.
Despite his harsh criticism, though, Kubrick called King during the writing process at 7 a.m. Now, at book signings, he reports that Kubrick asked him, and quote, "I think stories of the supernatural are fundamentally optimistic, don't you? If there are ghosts, then that means we survive death." King countered that it isn't optimistic if you think about hell. And Kubrick simply responded that he didn't believe in hell. And that's like a story that Stephen King tells at book signings. And of course, Stephen King wasn't wowed with the Kubrick version once it was released. In a 1983 interview with Playboy, King said, "I'd admired Kubrick for a long time and had great expectations for the project, but I was deeply disappointed in the end result. Parts of the film are chilling, charged with a relentless claustrophobic terror, but others fell flat." He specifically took issue with the casting. Jack Nicholson, though a fine actor, was all wrong for the part, King said.
What?
Quoting again, his last big role had been One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and between that and The Manic Grin, the audience automatically identified him as a loony from the first scene. But the book is about Jack Torrance's gradual descent into madness through the malign influence of the Overlook.
Oh, that's fair.
If the guy is nuts to begin with, then the entire tragedy of his downfall is wasted. End quote.
Okay. Quick movie challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Name one Jack Nicholson movie where he's not fucking nuts.
Something's Gotta Give from 2003.
Well, you know what?
You haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen that one.
Okay.
Have you?
Yes, several times.
Is he nuts?
I mean, no. I mean, I don't know. Not any more than anyone else is. He's like an old guy who wants love.
Is he crazy in love?
I don't know. Should we watch it? Movie club? So, of course, these two versions are super different. In King's version, Jack is sympathetic, but in Kubrick's version, he becomes a full-fledged movie villain.
Okay. Well, in all fairness, these are two storytellers that had different visions for their protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, not having read the book, but I don't think one is necessarily more correct than the other.
No, I always say that movies and books are two totally different mediums.
Usually, yes.
And so I don't mind that they're two different versions of a story. I mean, I think Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick are both geniuses in their own right. They both have flaws and they both have done really amazing things. So I think it's great that they both took a stab at a story and we have two really strong representations of it. Of course, I understand King feeling the way he does. I'm sure you feel gutted when someone throws your script away and just steals your ideas and becomes like the iconic forefront for it. Sure. Like, I get the hesitation there, but I don't think it means the movie's shit. I like the movie a lot.
Absolutely.
You may be wondering why the book version, and of course based on the real life version, we see the room 217 as the most haunted room in the hotel. But the movie version calls it room 237. Any guesses why?
Done.
This is because the exterior scenes for the movie were shot at the Timberland Lodge in Oregon.
Okay.
And the hotel actually had a room 217, and they didn't want guests to be scared to stay there. So they picked 237 because that room doesn't actually exist in that.
Typical.
So I have one really weird final thing to say. It's very dark.
We're going even further off the rails.
This is really off the rails. But in my research, I kind of got sucked into a little bit of a rabbit hole. Not a big one, but a little one. So there's actually quite a few conspiracy theories about The Shining, which I had no idea. And this one is like a little bit heavy or very heavy, so content warning here. But one theory is that the film is actually about, totally putting aside the book, right? The source material. That the film is actually about Jack sexually abusing his son and his wife refusing to acknowledge this until the end.
What?
And this, I found this on a Reddit thread, which seems totally insane. But there's an entire website dedicated to this theory. And so there's these Easter eggs that are throughout the movie that back up this theory.
Okay.
One of them is the fact that when Jack is waiting at the very beginning of the movie, he's reading a Playgirl magazine with a cover article about incest, which could just be Stanley Kubrick like pulling a weird ass magazine from a thrift store. You know what I mean? It might not have
just the fuck with your audience, you know.
But anyway, just to say, there's all of these websites out there about, and I'm sure about all of his movies, but about The Shining and trying to like infuse all of these other elements of meaning and like allegory and metaphors into them.
Right. I mean, this is film school subtext.
Yeah.
Prime.
Exactly. So you can find those pretty easily on Reddit if you just search for like Shining conspiracy theories, if you're into that kind of thing. A few final quick facts to round us out, okay? Jack Nicholson actually improvised the film's iconic line, "Here's Johnny." This was the only film that Danny Lloyd was ever in. And at the time, he did not realize he was filming a horror movie, which is The Boy.
I've heard this. And final fun fact, the final snow scene, the filmmakers used 900 tons of salt. The end. For what?
For the snow.
They make snow out of salt?
Yes.
Since when?
I think because he like trudges through it. It's really deep, and he spends so much time. There's like a huge sequence in it that maybe anything else would have been melted. Because they fair. Really like it's up to his knees at some point. Like they're really trudging through it.
So when snow is falling,
yeah,
when you actually see snow falling through the air, that's actually soap. Little soap particles falling.
Be bad for your hands. The Stanley Hotel, one of the most haunted hotels.
After all of this, it does seem to have a strong. Of all the places we've discussed, which at this point abundant, dare I say, this has the most going for it.
I will say too, I didn't talk about this is the first time in a recording that I haven't talked about a lot of my research because this episode is going so long and there's so many examples of hauntings. And again, in my research, it's the tip of the iceberg for what's been reported. I tried to like pull out the most authentic things I could find, but I'm sure I've missed... And
you did a great job.
Thank you. But I'm sure I've missed big bits of history or big moments. Did you. And that's...
I'm just saying that for all the fact checkers out there.
That's what to expect on this podcast. But it is also to say it's just a thing.
This podcast is incredibly enthusiastic, wildly inaccurate.
It's not true. It's not true. But it is just me trying my best. So sometimes I miss things. Now it is time for a haunted hotel story.
Oh my God. I totally forgot we had a story.
Not just a story that our friends Michael and Pilar really voice acted and also created music and ambiance and Foley for.
Oh, I cannot wait to hear version 2.0.
Yeah. So first of all, Michael and Pilar are both part of Jollyville Radio, which is an awesome podcast that we've collaborated with before. So check out Jollyville Radio on Instagram. Check them out anywhere you can listen to podcasts. If you're looking for something totally different from this podcast, something happier, more light, and put on by some really, really cool people, they also do a community beat section where they, try to spread good cheer and people doing good things. So it's a great show.
Or even if you really love this podcast and think, you know what? I want something that's just like this. Still, give it a shot. It might be for you.
It might be. Sometimes they've talked about Lizzie Borden before, so sometimes there's overlap.
So, bottom line, if you like this or if you don't like this,
doesn't matter.
Jollyville is for you.
Jollyville is for everybody. That should be their tagline.
Yeah.
For everyone.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway.
For everyone, not for nobody.
Not for nobody. All right. Here we go. Here's the story.
The Night Elevator. Written by Abby Branker. Read by Michael Crosa and Pilar Caperta.
William liked the noise the elevator grate made when he slid it shut. He was an elevator operator at the Clementine Hotel. He worked the night shift, which he preferred. He slept in late during the day and got to see the underbelly of the city come to life at night. William had started life on a dairy farm in Nebraska, so being on a first-name basis with some of the most prominent sex workers and politicians in one of the country's most bustling cities was a thrill. He loved the elevator itself. There was only one in the lobby. It felt rich. Everything was covered in gold. Beautiful marble tiles patterned the floor, deep mahogany wood lined the walls, and a crisp gray slate adorned the ceiling. Sometimes he pretended that he was one of the social elite riding the elevator, not just the boy operating it. Today was the first day that felt like winter. Temperatures had dropped dramatically, and he could see the deep red slip peeking out beneath her dramatic fur coat. She winked at him as she boarded the elevator.
Which floor today, miss?
William grinned. 7, please, Willie. She returned his smile. William blushed as he slid the door shut. He thought Josie was just the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. She was kind and confident. She was open about her profession and proud of the life she'd built for herself. Sometimes she would tell him stories of her encounters. He loved when she lingered in the hallway with him. Not in a voyeuristic way, but in a human connection way. He thought of her as his confidant. No one had ever trusted him with secrets in Nebraska. He hadn't known about the complexities of human relationships and needs growing up. He had known that his parents were unhappily married, but they never did anything about it. Now living in this city and watching the comings and goings and the secret trysts and the passionate romances and exchanges, he realized that there are many ways to live and love. Josie stepped out on the 7th floor, leaving him alone with the grainy, crackling elevator music. He never knew if he should call
Have fun.
as she left or if that was in bad taste, so he silently tipped his hat to her. Then, something happened that had never happened before. The button for the 10th floor glowed red. The color was very out of place in the ornate elevator. The keypad was framed in gold leaf, and the buttons were pure white with black numbers. There was no illumination behind any of the buttons, which made the glowing red digits stand out even more. William squeezed his eyes shut for a moment. He was convinced he had one too many late nights, and it was starting to catch up with him. But when he stole another glance, the button still glowed red. What else could he do? He pushed it. The elevator started to ascend. The door opened on 10, and for a moment, the 10th floor looked as expected. The familiar hotel hallway stretched before him. Then the lights flickered. Before he could react, the button for the 2nd floor started to glow. He ignored it, popping his head out of the elevator and into the hallway. What felt like a gust of wind rushed past him with enough force to knock him back inside the elevator. It cackled at him from the hallway. He pushed the button for the 2nd floor. 8 floors below, he peered out into the 2nd floor passageway. He knew something was wrong. The lights were out. He could barely see. He squinted. A chill crept up his spine. Where were all the guests? He knew the 2nd floor was totally booked up. It was oddly quiet. If the lights were out in the hotel, the guests would be panicking or yelling for help. This had to be a dream. He backed up into the elevator and pinched his arm. Nothing. He reached for the lobby button, but the 7th floor started to blink red.
Josie.
He should make sure that she was all right. He pressed it. A piercing scream greeted him when he landed on the 7th floor. He stumbled out into the hallway. The scream echoed around him, but he wasn't sure which direction it was coming from. The lights flickered every few seconds. His heart was racing. He was terrified as he ran blindly down the hallway.
Josie, is that you?
He called into the darkness. He passed a small girl peeking out of a door on the right. He knew new children were checked in. The Hotel Clementine was not usually a family destination. Something felt really off.
Hey, are you all right? Are your parents in there?
He bent down to try to get closer to her. He wanted to comfort her. The girl looked at him with a wide, deep smile spread across her face. Her pigtails bobbed as she shook her head and slammed the door closed in his face. He kept moving. He was sure he was hallucinating, but he felt compelled to keep going.
Josie? Hello?
He caught his reflection in a mirror on the wall and jumped. A red cross glowed behind him. He turned on his heel and saw the red glow out of the hotel window. How had he not noticed it before? It had to be at least 20 feet tall. Was it on a building? He couldn't tell. Then he realized the rest of the city was dark. No streetlights, windows, or even cars were illuminated. It must have been a blackout. But the red cross glowed brightly, casting a crimson hue across the silent city. Something tapped him politely on his back. He turned to see the little girl who had slammed the door in his face.
Oh, hello there. I think there's a blackout.
William said as he bent down closer to talk to her. She giggled.
It's not a blackout.
What do you mean?
William felt the heaviness of her response.
It's always dark here. You're on the other side now.
She looked joyful, like she was playing with him.
The other side of what?
He tried to understand.
The elevator?
The girl turned to leave.
Wait, what are you saying? How do I get back?
He called after her.
You can't.
She giggled harder. Her eyes flashed a bright, deep red, and she ran off down the hall and disappeared. He sprinted back towards the elevator. It was covered in caution tape and cobwebs. It looked like it hadn't been used in 50 years. He frantically hit the call button, but nothing moved or shifted. It was as if there was no electricity in this entire city except the vibrant neon cross. Panic was bubbling over inside of him as he fought to get back to where he was from. He tried to pry open the door to the shaft, but it wouldn't budge. His fingers bled from the effort. Nothing. His heartbeat continued to rise. He banged against the metal doors, screaming for help. He didn't care who heard him, just anyone. He wanted anyone to hear him.
Please help me.
His calls went unanswered. His hands were shaking with fear. Blood continued to drop from his raw fingers. Eventually he sat, defeated. He leaned his back against the elevator doors, trying to remember what his life was like only an hour ago, trying to wake up from this nightmare. He sat for a very long time, racking his brain for an escape plan. Something. Anything he hadn't thought of yet. There had to be a way out. But no brilliant epiphanies struck him. No aha moments. One moment he had been in the elevator with Josie, and the next he was very, very alone. He sat there hoping and praying for a long time, trying to block out the sporadic giggles and screams that surrounded him for the rest of eternity.
Wonderful.
It was, wasn't it? It was delightful.
If only Jollyville had Pete as one of the cast members, I feel like the whole circle would be complete.
Oh, yeah. I feel like Pete was our friend who originally read Night Elevator very early on. I feel like Pete and Michael would be like excellent in a game group together.
Oh, yeah.
Pete's great in a game group. But yeah, they did a really great job reading it. Also, again, major shout out to Pilar because she designed our logo and all of the great new merch that we have coming out.
Absolutely. And a shout out to the Metal Beast, who streams on Twitch quite regularly. If you want to listen to the original reading of The Night Elevator.
Yes, very good. Well, my friends, I believe that's all we have to say. You can follow us at the Lunatics Project on Instagram. You can also join our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You'll get access to bonus episodes of Horror Movie Club. You will also get access to our biannual horror magazine and all kinds of other cool perks. And please consider rating the show on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. It really, really helps us.
Ratings go such a far way, especially with small podcasts like this. And even if you take a few minutes just to leave a few stars, that means so much. So please leave a rating, leave a comment, check out Jollyville, check out the Metal Beast. These are all things that are small details that go for such a long way. If you're traveling, please check out the Stanley Hotel. Who knows what you'll encounter? We know that we would love to check it out ourselves. especially once traveling is acceptable again.
Yes.
It is on the radar. Until next time.
Until next time. And write us if you've ever stayed there. Bye. If you want to support the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast, consider joining our Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to bonus episodes, access to Lunatics Magazine, and all kinds of other fun perks. You can also support the show by picking up some of our really cool, fun new merch, featuring gorgeous designs by Pilar Caperta. That's available on Teespring, and you can follow the link in the show notes to find that. And one of the most important things you can do to help small podcasts like us grow is to rate and review on Apple or anywhere else you listen to the Lunatics Radio Hour. Every review really does go such a long way. And of course, you can follow us at the Lunatics Project on Instagram. Thank you.